Greetings. It is now May 18th, 2020 here in Bucheon, South Korea, the Catholic University of Korea. My name is Ben DeDominicis, and this is my Zoom presentation for the virtual Chicago conference. The title of the presentation is Multinational Enterprises and Economic Nationalism, a Strategic Analysis of Culture. So I'm using the paper's notes. So from the abstract, I'm not going to read the abstract all, just to summarize some points. The paper critiques economic nationalism from the perspective of organizational management. It discusses the implications for leadership of reconciling these cultural differences within a multinational enterprise as national values among multinational staff members in regard to communication among personnel. Intercultural international perceptions of other cultures, specifically stereotyping, are part of the challenge to effective leadership communication within a multicultural, multinational organizational environment. A leadership imperative is to facilitate multinational cultural organizational value integration. A response to recent survey critiques of the state of the field regarding culture and international business is presented in this paper. I just want to highlight that I first confronted this issue of the conceptualization of culture as a causal factor in private sector business organizational behavior when I was assigned to teach an undergraduate course here at Catholic University of Korea called Methodology for International Studies. And we don't have a business department in this international studies school, but the International Studies department is a major, and it mostly orients itself towards preparing students for work and at an entry-level position in the private sector. So I was assigned to teach this course, Methodology for International Studies, and I was aware of the basic organizational literature available in international business regarding the influence of culture. Some of these books are quite well known. Perhaps the most seminal of them is this book by Hofstede and later his son and Minkoff, Culture and Organization and Cultures and Organizations. This work or this perspective, first started by Hofstede in 1980, appears to be a seminal reference. It comes across in the business literature, in international business and cultural literature quite a bit. The book, another book that's quite often highlighted in the literature is this book, Riding the Waves of Culture, Understanding Diversity in Global Business by Trompenaars and Hampton Turner. And it's now in its third edition. And so this book is quite popular as an introduction to culture in international business. And another text that has just come up that's been updated is this by Richard Lewis, When Cultures Collide, Leading Across Cultures. So for this class on methodology, I utilized sections of this entire book and sections of this book for an introduction to qualitative methodology by Cresswell and Poth. And this is a well-known text. Qualitative inquiry, research design, choosing among 5 approaches. Because my intent was also to introduce the students to doing research, qualitative research, this framework appeared to be quite useful for a first dry run for an undergraduate student as to how to interview and prepare scenario questions for other international students here from other national cultures at the Catholic University of Korea. But there's a lot of differentiation in how to go about defining culture. So we use Trompenaars and Hampton Turner framework, and the screen I want to share is this one that highlights some notes that I want to use. This is from the Trompenaars and Hampton Turner book. They have a model of culture, and this is from the text itself. Trompenaars has stated elsewhere that norms are shared orientations of what we define as what we should do. Values are what we like to do. Basic assumptions are values that have become norms. And my addition to this, and in this paper, to develop this notion of culture and its role as a causal factor in international business and international relations more broadly, is to highlight the framework by Martha and Richard W. Cottam, published in 2001 in this book, Nationalism and Politics, the Political Behavior of Nation States, that came out in 2001, and to highlight that one of the prevalent values of Homo sapiens, particularly at the collective level, is to to form and defend and expand the security and status of shared, large, intensely held self-identity communities, nations. So, Trompenaars describes values as what we like to do. One of the things Homo sapiens likes to do is form in groups and feel positively and strongly defend them if they're under threat, and to expand them in terms of their influence, their national influence, if there is a perceived opportunity. And also, as part of this framework highlighted here, that actors like to act in this way, while also they are more prone, nationalistic actors, to perceive significant challenge, to see threats and opportunities in the external environment, and they're also more prone to stereotype the source of those perceived threats and opportunities. Stereotyping is a critical point in the presentation that I make in the paper, and then I want to highlight here. Trompenaars and Hampton Turner talk about stereotyping, but insofar as, for example, they mention that it's a tendency for people, they say people tend to notice differences more than similarities. So they compare, for example, French culture with American culture, and they say, of course, the French and the Americans share more similarities than differences, but people tend to notice the differences, and that's how they define French versus American culture. And of course, they highlight this notion of stereotyping, but they don't explain why stereotyping happens. They say that stereotyping is the tendency to exaggerate differences, and I want to highlight why people tend to do that, when they tend to exaggerate differences, how they tend to exaggerate differences in terms of patterns of stereotyping. You can predict how they will simplify their perception of the challenge, of the source of the challenge, another company or another state. You can predict the kinds of stereotyping that will emerge. And on the basis, of course, of people's perceptions of reality, they make policy decisions collectively or even individually, but also collectively. And so that's my contribution and to this discussion. And in the paper, my field is in political science and international relations. But when the case I highlighted, multinational enterprises and nationalism's impact within multinational enterprises, is this famous case that happened, began in 2018 when Carlos Ghosn, the chief executive officer of Nissan and the Renault-Nissan Mitsubishi alliance, Renault being a famous French company, automobile company, and Nissan from Japan, was arrested and detained for months by Japanese prosecutors under charges of fraud. I think that was in December 2018, and he was held for months, and then he fled in a bizarre way, claiming to have hidden in a music equipment case, indicating that he was conveniently allowed to flee, is the suspicion. And I highlight in the paper how it appears evidently that the Japanese side of the alliance, Renault-Nissan alliance, came to suspect that Ghosn was advocating or promoting French interests. Ghosn himself is a Lebanese Maronite who was born and raised in Brazil, but he highlights in his own memoirs from 2005, in which he describes the success that he oversaw in reviving Nissan at the time. That the Maronites, he says himself, the Lebanese Maronites have a 1,000-year close association with France, and they're loyal to France, going back to the Crusades. So, and that's a convenient focus to explain what is going on. So the paper's a little bit lengthy, so I'm going through it here. So the paper tends to look at culture from the perspective as being a behavioral manifestation that emerges collectively among an in-group when that group perceives an intense threat or opportunity to the national well-being. So, you know, of course, Nissan is headquartered in Japan, Renault is headquartered in France, and France and Japan are nationalistic communities. They are they approach close the nation state category. Not all states are nation states. The most clear examples of states, multinational states collapsing because of the nationalism amongst their constituent nations includes the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. African states, with some rare exceptions like Somalia, well, even that's a problematic case. I shouldn't bring that up right now. Are multi-ethnic post-colonial states with more or less arbitrary borders that have a very diverse group of ethnic groups that are the primary terminal self-identity group identifications for the people within them. Those are not nation states. France, post-World War II, Poland, Japan, Norway, they approach nation-state status. Less so United States, but it's a territorial-based nation-state. Japan, China is 94% Han Chinese. It is a compound identity, but still a nation-state. So since I want to relate this paper to the international business literature, I want to highlight that the immediate impetus for writing this paper was the 2018 article published in the Journal of International Business Studies by authors Tung and Stahl in 2018. And the title of the article was "The Tortuous Evolution of the Role of Culture in International Business Research, What We Know, What We Don't Know, and Where We Are Headed." And then there was a response to that Tung and Stahl article by Pearson and Barreto in 2018 entitled "Interpreting Societal Cultural Value Dimensions." And but Tung and Stahl, responding to Tung and Stahl is the framework for this paper, or help lay out the framework for this paper. Tung and Stahl highlight that stress the need for international business research to embrace interdisciplinary research methods and multi-level approaches to study phenomena-based and driven research, such as the rise of economic nationalism. So yeah, that's the framework for this paper, the rise of economic nationalism. And income inequality, in short, grand challenges, they say, grand challenges that we have alluded to in their paper, in the Tung and Stahl paper. They want to bring about a renaissance in international business research in order to, by incorporating different perspectives. So that's sort of a self-justification for why I've decided to try to add my 2 cents from a political science, international relations perspective. And they lament the difficulty that the international business literature has had in incorporating the role of culture and cultural difference in conceptualizing its function in international business. I, of course, have a literature review section in the paper, and to go to explain, for example, Brexit and Trumpism and the rise of the National Reassembly, or used to be called the National Front in France. These highly developed, so-called advanced nation states are showing this conservative populist nationalism, and indicating intense polarization within these societies. Sure, these societies have changed a lot. I highlight in the paper, of course, that 2020 Germany has a very different values collectively than 1940 Germany due to context. I try to explain how there's been the rise of so-called postmodern values in the United States, giving rise to the new left, or contributing to the new left movements in the United States in the 60s and 70s, and the green movements elsewhere in Germany. And of course, perhaps very well known to people are these Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, which has been around for a long time, and highlights that people have needs that they pursue hierarchically. Once safety is considered to be satisfied, you don't have to worry about being killed. You start to look for routines. You start to motivate your behavior around having a stable, secure lifestyle. And then once you can take that for granted, you have a job, you have a place, a roof over your head, you start to focus more on your relationships. And once you feel valued and for who you are, you start to explore and your capacities and potentials within society. And once you have tested yourself and come to like yourself because you know who you are and why you are that way, and you can then move to self-actualization. You stop worrying about so much about the evaluation critiques of others and focus on your own uniqueness. And then this corresponds vaguely, although I'm not certain causally how to explain it, with Carl Jung's typology of behavioral traits. People that are on this hierarchy tend to demonstrate behavior patterns that correlate with these needs. So somebody who's intensely loyal to friends, family, is focusing on these needs. Nationalism on a collective level tends to associate with these needs, right? Nationalism is a compensatory phenomenon for people seeking to satisfy and communities seeking to satisfy these needs. But of course, with globalization and greater economic interdependence, we see a rise in inequality and difference between those who are benefiting from globalization, people like me here with a job in Korea, and until recently, flying quite a bit and traveling and being a strong proponent of globalization, versus those sections of society in which that have less ability to compete, that have less skills, less language, multi-language abilities, seeing increasing diversification of society in terms of values and identities, with reacting with hostility and supporting nationalist backlash actors like Donald Trump. And so you have this polarization with sections of society viewing themselves as having an identity, self-identity commensurate with a more globalized community, while other sections of society perceiving this more as threat, as they are more traditional and nationalistic in conservative way, in conservative ideological perspectives in terms of their nationalism. So, I highlight in the book, in the paper, the work of Engelhardt. Engelhardt, built his career on studying postmodern values and how they arise and their impact on politics in these societies. So, some important points to highlight. Of course, this is a framework for understanding, schematically how change in societies occurs. One of the reasons why Germany is less nationalistic is because societies do learn from terrible catastrophes. Italian fascism, German Nazism contributed to Italians and Germans being less nationalistic, although still you see movements in that direction. And that reflects the impact of experiences, disturbances. And of course, early socialization, we are made into Germans and Koreans. There's an impact, of course, in terms of human predisposition towards forming in groups, for example, as well as other values. And then World War II, for example, was a major disturbance. The pandemic will be a major disturbance, and its crises that emerge from it and alter prevailing worldviews and alter value systems. We see a rise in nationalism in the United States already as in response to the pandemic crises. So, of course, this is only supposed to be 20 minutes long. And so just to highlight, you can predict the kind of stereotypes that emerge. And this is highlighted here. If I see a threat from somebody that I perceive as equal in capability, roughly speaking, equal in culture, and that's tied today with perceived ability to manipulate technology. And the intentions are harmful. I'm likely perceiving them as a small elite and to stereotype them as a threat, the enemy, or as Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union back in early 1980s, the evil empire. Hitler saw degeneracy in his ability, his attempt to conquer the world, that the rest of the world lacked the will and determination to resist a properly motivated and organized Germany. Degenerate stereotype. There are policy patterns that associate with these behaviors behavior patterns, I should say, with the enemy stereotype, the degenerate stereotype. The ally is derivative of seeing an enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, but it tends to be ephemeral because, for example, we used to love China when China was our ally in the end of the Cold War against the Soviet Union in the 1980s. But then now there are problems, so they're no longer an ally. And these are the policy predisposition patterns associated with this. So this is my addition. I highlight this also. This is a list of bargaining levers, and the extent to which a company is perceived is controlled or influenced by its headquartered government. That gives more bargaining leverage, obviously, if to the United States in negotiating with other actors, China, Iran, insofar as they know that multinational banks headquartered in the United States are not going to do business with Iran because the United States will punish them. And so China is trying to develop Huawei as a counterpart, development of national champions. So, of course, I'm already out of time here. Nationalism is not an ideology. Nationalism is a value. It can associate with ideologies, and it's also associated with strong emotions, as we're seeing with in many cases, but on a multinational enterprise level with the Carlos Ghosn case. So I think I have to stop there because I think my time is up. So I am going to have to stop at this point, and I hope that we will meet at some point next year. So thank you very much, and have a good day.